It's time for the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer and Bruce Zeman.
Shoots! He scores!
And now, with a trip around the National Hockey League, here's Jim and Bruce.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Full Press Hockey Weekly Show. This is the pregame show for Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, alongside Chris Wassel. And you know this legendary guy, Bruce Zeman, Vox Media, NHL analyst. He's our guest here today on a Game 5. And guys, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Hey, no problem. Chris, always a pleasure to have you here. Look, before we get into the Stanley Cup Final, as we head to a Game 5, Chris and I were like, maybe there'd be Game 5. Maybe there was going to Game 4. We're going to see a sweep. I'm back down in Florida for Game 5. And Edmonton won Game 4, 8-1, and we'll get into the snowman and everything like that. But we have to talk about some news in Columbus. It's in regards to Pascal Vincent. He was fired by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Not a shock if you followed the team this year at all after what happened with Mike Babcock. And he's going to be out of a job. But, you know, it seems that Don Waddell, the new GM, is making some major changes as we figured. And the coach is the first to go. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Okay, this is really simple. For those that don't know, this happened right at 5 o'clock. So the first instinct to think on the NHL news flow chart, is this Friday? No. Okay, proceed onward. Monday? Yeah. Okay. All right. Totally makes sense. No, it's Columbus. None of this makes sense only because it took so long for it to happen. Look, Columbus is a mess. Everybody knows it. Don Waddell didn't walk into this blindly. So he knows, obviously, he has to dismantle a lot of parts here. And the coach was the first one to go. And let's face it, you know, Jim and I were talking about this beforehand even. This was going to blow up in Columbus's face no matter what because of Pascal. There's a reason why he wasn't hired anywhere. He got to like the second or third interview and people were just like, no. When you see that happen once, see that happen twice, 3, 4 times, maybe more. It's like that classic Commodore song, you know, once, twice, 3 times, a clunker. And in this case, you knew what was going to happen, and you knew Don Waddell had to do something. And I guess the next question now is, what's next?
Yeah, and I think that Chris is 100% right. I mean, Columbus is a dumpster fire. It really is, between the Babcock signing and, you know, they lost their coach, they lost their GM earlier this year, and really this is not a surprise, as Chris alluded to a moment ago. Don Waddell coming in there, and he really needs to change the organizational culture. This may be the start of that, but boy, whoever steps into that role has got some task ahead of them. Yeah,
they do. You know, look, there's some names being thrown out there because, you know, when they brought in Babcock, they kind of wanted to go with a guy that had experience with this young group. You know, names out there are going to be obviously Gerard Gallant, Todd McClellan, Jay Woodcroft, Dean Evison. Those are names that are going to be out there. I don't know if they go the inexperienced route. I think those are the guys that are probably going to be brought in by Donnie Waddell. And I would not be shocked if a guy like Todd McClellan comes in there and, you know, tries to get this thing back on the rails like it was supposed to. Because, again, I think he's the closest to Babcock as what they wanted, a veteran guy who's been there before. We saw what he's done with the Los Angeles Kings before he was relieved of his duties. And, you know, look, Columbus is a complete dumpster fire. You have Patrick Laine, who's asked for a trade. He wants out. He was never a fit anyway. It was never going to work. You got to wonder now when Johnny Gaudreau is going to be the next guy out of there. Because to me, Chris and I were talking about this off air, when Columbus, outside of 2019, when they made that run, when they perform their best, they don't have all these superstars on that team. And they got to get a coach in there that's going to be able to have everybody play the same way. And I don't think the players believed in Vincent because, like I said before, there's a reason why he was passed over numerous times. So if the players don't believe in the coach, then what's the point of having him there? And you knew Don Waddell was always going to bring in his guy.
Yeah, and just to kind of build on what Chris and Jim have both said, if you look at what has happened in Columbus this year, first of all, you've got the Babcock thing, and then you've got the firestorm after that, where did he do stuff that was inappropriate? Did he not do stuff? You've got the players having to stand up for him publicly. And Jim, you and I talked about that on the podcast that we have done. You know, there were rumblings behind the scene that a lot of them were pissed off about this. Then they bring in a coach that the players don't believe in. What a mess. I mean, what an absolute mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Complete mess. Again, like Chris, you know, we mentioned Laine. Where do you think he ends up going?
Well, there's a few teams that he's certainly not going to. Let's see. Let's start eliminating some teams for fun. Winnipeg, New Jersey. He's not going to New York. Sorry, Ranger fans, it's not happening. He's not going to the Islanders. See Nick Ehlers potentially for a whole lot of sweetening. You know, you start going down the list of teams that were Patrick Laine would actually be a fit, and there are a few. So again, I'm kind of interested. Does Detroit do something crazy? I mean, that's like the one wild card. Detroit has to make the playoffs. I know people are saying Buffalo. Look, Buffalo's in mourning right now. For those that don't know, there was a certain iconic restaurant that burned down this morning.
Yep.
Pink. I still can't believe this. I was there just last year. For those that don't know, this was like Buffalo's answer to insert beautiful deli restaurant in New Jersey that we're spoiled with, but nonetheless, one of the best places you'll ever eat at, and now it's gone.
Gone like that. May it rest in peace.
But you know, again, people have to understand what's just going on here with this, and I'm gonna turn this right over to Bruce for more.
Yeah, and I think Chris is entirely right. There are teams that he would be a good fit for, and I think there are teams that he's not going to go to. But you know, kind of like getting back to what we said with Vincent and Columbus, you start to hear things about players. You know, one team maybe it's an issue, a second team it's an issue, and now I mean I think whoever does get Laine will get a very motivated player because he's got to prove he's not an issue on a team. I mean, he's had this is his third team. Please correct me if I'm wrong here.
Second team, I believe.
Second team, I'm sorry.
Yeah, second team, because he was part of the Dubois trade that sent Roslovic and Dubois to Columbus. Dubois on his third team, by the way.
Thank you.
And potentially could be bought out, but that's a topic for another day about Pierre-Luc Dubois. But yes, no, go ahead on Laine.
You know, and again, you know, I had heard Buffalo too, but boy, they're going to have to, whoever is looking to bring him in is going to have to do their due diligence. And I think it's got to be a good fit. I think it's got to be a good fit for the team and the player. But I mean, the good thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, he's definitely going to be a player with something to prove wherever he winds up, I think.
Yeah, real quick. And this will be the last part of, this topic for Columbus before we get into the series. You know, for years we've heard, Laine, maybe New Jersey winger, scoring winger. They need a scoring winger. Could you guys see that as a fit?
In a word, no.
That's fair.
It's not happening.
No.
I mean, I agree with Chris. I don't see that happening. I don't see that as a good fit. I mean, New Jersey got so many other issues right now. I just don't think that's a road they're going to go down.
No, I agree with that. But, obviously so many rumblings and rumors out there. But again, the Columbus watch is on as they need a new head coach. But all eyes are going to turn to Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. Like we mentioned before off the top, Edmonton Oilers won Game 4 back at home, 8-1 over the Florida Panthers. The Cup was in the building, and then it was not. And everybody was on a plane back to South Florida for Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. And look, it's a different mindset, right? When you're building towards something, when you're building in a series, you get to that third game, great, you're up 3-0. But that fourth one, that barrier, that fourth game is always the hardest, they say. There's a reason why, right? The expectation is different. Your mindset is different. As much as you want to keep the same plane and the same concentration, it's just a game. It's just a game, but it's not just a game because the end result is different because the season's over and you hoist the Stanley Cup. And look, Florida didn't have a great game, but that's all credit to what Edmonton did in game 4. They came out, stretch passes, came out gangbusters. Chris and I talked about it. First couple of goals were going to be huge, and they did it. They get a shorthanded goal. Now, look, Florida could have scored on that power play. And real quick, I want to get everybody's thoughts on this because I thought the Nurse knee-on knee was worse than the Fogle knee-on knee that was given 5-minute major in a game misconduct in game 2. Darnell Nurse got off lucky.
Wait,
yeah,
Darnell
I don't think
Nurse
you're
is
wrong.
still playing in this series?
Yeah, I think Darnell Nurse is still playing in this series, yes.
It's amazing, right? I mean, considering
Wow.
Okay, for those listening, he did score a goal. He's still a minus 236, but he's still a defensive liability, but he scored a goal. It's like saying Donovan McNabb almost won a Super Bowl, but then he upchucked. Oh wait, there's a Kachuk, so there is a connection here of sorts. Strange but true. Look, all kidding aside, Edmonton does have the market cornered on building snowmen. We had a few other extracurricular type things that came out of this game, and some flashy thingy that might or might not have happened. Well, okay, it happened. That was definitely different. You mix alcohol with Edmonton fans, you get some very interesting results. But apparently you mix the fear of elimination with the Edmonton Oilers, and you also get some very interesting results, which seems to always happen with this team, particularly the last couple seasons. Obviously, this year is different because they went on this run. They got all the way to Stanley Cup Final. You think they're going to get swept, and then Edmonton goes and does what they did over the weekend. Maybe we should have just seen this coming, Jim. I mean,
we were kind of talking about it.
This is the sad part, Bruce. We were hedging about this. This was the agony in this. So, full transparency. So, for those that don't know, I write a daily article at gambling.com for what they call the U.S. panel. The U.S. panel is one person. That's me. I sat there and it's like, all right, I'm thinking of what I'm going to do for this game for picks. And this comes into my head instantly. And immediately I felt ill. I'm like, okay. Adam Henrique and Matthias Janmark are both going to score goals in this game. Something crazy is going to outright happen. They're actually going to score before McDavid even gets a point. All right, let's start looking up odds. How crazy is this? Okay. Janmark is a plus 800 to score a goal anytime in this game. For perspective, that is the lowest among all Edmonton forwards. He scores first. He scores shorthanded. So, on certain sites like BetMGM, Caesars, and such, there was a profit boost if he scored on a special teams. The first goal wasn't even listed actually for him. Somebody screwed up there. But I got it at plus 1,200. There was a 50% profit boost on Caesars for anytime goals last night. Well, the other night. Henrique, by the way, was a not so slouchy plus 550 in all this. Guess who Chris Dumley picked on the money line? Florida. Yeah. But since that's only like plus 110 and nobody cares about that, you hit the other 2 or 3 things and they're like, no one cares about that. That's kind of the sad part. It's like, for me, it's different. For most people, it'll be like, oh, you made such and such amount of money, whatever. And I'm like, no. I'll be frank and honest with this. I wanted the damn Nightmare Bear to come.
And I think a lot of people wanted the Nightmare Bear to come on Saturday night. After the hellacious travel that happened for some from South Florida to Edmonton, that took like 30 hours that I heard, which was ridiculous.
Wow,
But
we could do stories of playoff travel because I talk to as many beat people as I can. I think at least 2 or 3 people from Dallas. I can remember this. I want to see Bruce Levine had like his own like. Trying to remember the lady that writes for the Dallas Morning News that legitimately had like so many things go wrong on one trip. She had a hail delay. The flight couldn't get off the ground in Denver because of hail. She got to she didn't even get to Edmonton. They diverted her to Calgary. She went to rent the car. She couldn't rent the car. She had to find somebody that would rent a car to her. She gets the rent a car. I think she blows a tire somewhere in between. I mean, you name it. Like
horror stories. These are horror stories. But back to the game, Bruce. We look at Game 4, and I know Chris Knobloch and the Oilers were coming into this, right? And Chris and I talked about it. They were saying all the right things. They had chances to score, just not burying. And all of a sudden, everything just clicked for them in that game.
Yeah, it was wild. And kind of like Chris had brought up a few minutes ago, I kind of expected this too. I really did. I expected to see some type of outburst from Edmonton at some point. But, and like you guys, I'm on a bunch of the other boards, and I was on a couple of things earlier today. And let me just put this out there from my perspective. I've been following this game for 40-something years. If anybody thinks that Florida let this happen yesterday, and I had a couple of people say that to me, well, they wanted to win at home. And I know not everybody's going to agree with me when I say this, but Connor McDavid is the best hockey player in the world. And I'm sorry if people don't agree with that, he is. And Leon Draisaitl is up there as well. What is going on in the Edmonton locker room now, very different from what's going on in the Florida locker room. You have just given the greatest player on the planet a little bit of life for his hockey team. And I do think that Florida is still going to win the series. I don't know if they're going to win tomorrow night, but I think they're going to win the series. But I'll tell you what, if by some stroke of magic, Edmonton is able to run off 3, and they're very capable of doing that, okay, because the game that I saw the other night, it was like watching men against boys. Because I was sitting there and I said, okay, McDavid and Draisaitl and Reek and like Chris said, some of the other players, they decided to show up. So, I mean, I'll put this out there to you guys. What do you expect in tomorrow night's game?
I expect a better Florida Panthers team. I think that the Panthers are going to get back to what they know best, and that's going to limit the rush chances. They got beat 7 times off the rush in Game 4. Badly off the rush. The McDavid goal to start the second period was unbelievable. What a shot. They're going to try to slow the game down. They're going to get more physical. They're going to play better defensively. They're going to try to keep Edmonton to the outside. They have to score first. I think that's the big thing for Florida is they got to score first, and they can't go down 2-0 because then it's a complete different game. But let's not forget, the Florida Panthers made this game 2-1, and if it wasn't for Stuart Skinner robbing Carter Verhaeghe, Game 4 could have been a lot different because Carter Verhaeghe was wide open and he got a glove on it, and it could have been 2-2, and it wasn't. And then they made it, and then Oilers made it 3-1 going into the period, and then the rest, it was just a snowball effect. And then they finally got on the board with a power play goal. So instead of 0 for 16, you're 1 for 15, and now you build confidence. And look, McDavid said it, right? Like, they got to go back to Edmonton regardless. They just want to bring a team with them now, right? They're going home regardless, whether they win or they lose. If they win, they're bringing a team with them. So they're saying all the right things. And let's not forget, like you said, Bruce, this team has rattled off wins before. During this past season, they've had win streaks or 7 or more games 3 times, most recently a 16-game winning streak, where in the first 2 games of that winning streak, they allowed 3 or more goals. That was it. After that, they allowed 2 or less. Like, that's how good defensively they can be. When everybody comes back, is back checking, everybody plays defense. Their transition game is great. I think it's one of those games, like I said, I think Maurice talked about it. It's one of those games. It's just like, all right, we know what was at stake. I don't think they didn't let this happen. It's just, it's a different game. The fourth game is always the hardest, and it's a different game, and it's a different vibe. And the mindset just might be thinking ahead a little bit. And I think those are one of those games I think as a coaching staff you kind of want, where you can just reset the room and reestablish the room and be like, hey guys, let's not worry about after. Let's just take care of business now.
A little humble pie never hurts.
No.
Okay, so this was like a big, giant, steaming humble pie. But look, if you look at the scoring chances in that game, throughout the third period, by the way, just look at the first 40 minutes. It wasn't that far off. It's just, it seemed like every medium or high danger scoring chance Edmonton had wound up in the net. It was that simple. All these chances that didn't go in that first 3 games went in. And we kind of said that had to happen. I just don't think anybody expected them all to go in at once. I mean, you kept looking at the score just going, he scored? He scored? What? And as soon as you saw like the first 2 goals, I was like, all right, that's it. Bear is packing up. We're just getting everything ready.
Everybody was joking. Everybody's like, all right, you get your flight ready, hotels booked. Like, everybody's head back to Florida.
I mean, you heard that across the board from fans, but experts, etc. And you can't just necessarily say this was like a one-off event not because of how pronounced it was, but because Edmonton is capable of this, which is kind of scary because we really don't know what's going to happen in Game 5. We really don't yet.
No.
Florida has, ironically, we're now going to say this. Florida has to convert their chances. Which is
I mean, I didn't mean to step on you, Chris. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Florida's kind of had their own mixed bag of sort of issues with converting chances. And you saw it even in Game 4. They had several chances early to take the lead, couldn't. Then they were down 1-0. They had a few more chances. Barkov misses a half open net. The obviously the double post on the power play that leads to the shorthanded goal, which undoubtedly is the most obvious turning point of a Stanley Cup Finals game, other than some guy named Niedermeyer.
Yeah.
When he didn't take games off in New Jersey. My fun story for another time.
Yeah, another time.
But, iconic plays like that, where it's like, as soon as you saw Verhey go too far, I'm like, oh God, that's a goal. Like, didn't he? It's horrible to say, but it's like it's like on X when you see like the one Twitter account, well, Twitter/X/ whatever.
A bird. Yeah. I call it bird now. I don't know.
I call it bird. Yeah, we could. I guess we'll call it the bird. But it's it's like the before unfortunate events. I love that account, by the way, just because it's so meticulous yet savage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching this. I'm like, that's in the net. I'm telling my girlfriend flat out, that's in the net. I don't even have to look. I don't even have to watch it. 3 seconds later, she's like, yeah, they scored. I'm like, there you go. And from there, it was just Florida got that one goal, but then, the 3-1 goal was kind of like the same sort of like a bunch of comedic events lead to Dow. Then it was 4-1. Then it was like Dow. Everything Florida tried to do would go wrong. Everything Edmonton tried to do somehow went right. And I feel like I watched this the night before in a different sport, and it was the same exact way. By the way, there's that obvious dumb connection involved with the 2 protagonists in all this. How eerie is that?
It's crazy, right? I mean, think about it. The NBA 3-0, Stanley Cup 3-0, 3-1, Mavericks blowout, Celtics, then the Oilers blowout, Florida. But, you get back to the game and we say this, right? And we've talked about this on the podcast, Bruce, about Stuart Skinner and the goaltending and the defense in Edmonton. And he, look, I'm not saying he was the reason they were down 3-0. In fact, I thought he played well in the first 3 games. And maybe Edmonton probably should have came out of Florida with a split. Let's be honest. I think if they were able to score in game 1, they were going to win game 1. That's how badly they played the Florida Panthers in game 1. If it wasn't for Sergei Bobrovsky, the Edmonton Oilers are taking game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. And this is probably a different Stanley Cup Final. But Stuart Skinner came up with the big saves that he needed, and he's going to have to do that again and do it a couple of more times. And again, it's all going to come down to the start for both teams. What do you expect in game 5?
I just got you back. Sure, okay. Do you want to take that first, Chris, or you want me to go?
I can fire this one off. Simply, Florida's going to come out like a house of fire. It's going to come down to can Stuart Skinner weather the first. I'm not going to say 10 minutes. Too cliche. Let's go like the first 4 or 5 minutes, because it seems like goals happen quicker in this series for some reason. Like between that 3 and 6, goals in the first 10 have hit every game. By the way, 5 for 5 tomorrow. We're just going to call it now. Just write it down.
Write it down. Also, I'm going to throw out Evan Rodriguez over shot total again.
You almost have to. That's automatic.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Books have not adjusted on certain numbers. As a matter of fact, I actually called a trader outright lazy between games 2 and 3 because they literally just flipped the numbers.
Yeah.
Literally. I won't mention which book, but it was literally just flipped. I mean, that's a cut and paste Wassel special right there. It's the old takes one to know one. I mean, I firmly admit this. But I do expect Florida to come out with a much more sustained effort among their 4 lines. They know now, hey, we can't let our foot off. We can't miss opportunities at all because they're going to end up in the back of our net as opposed to. And we need to get our goalie, who basically saved us in game 1 and in parts of 2 and 3, to the promised line. Again, 4th game hardest to win. Screw that cliche. You know what? You go out, you play, you win. That's it. That's it. You just have to outscore them. It doesn't matter how ugly it is. I don't care about that. I mean, it doesn't matter what league you're in. If you're in a Staten Island playoff roller hockey league, or if you're playing for the Stanley Cup. It just comes down to, hey, can we get more pucks in the net? And look, Stuart Skinner has played very well in the series. A couple moments where, all right, maybe this one should have been saved. That way. You could say the same with Sergei Bobrovsky. Even, the one game 2 where the puck went right to the armpit somehow, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. But it's the same kind of thing where you need your guys to simply just show up, play, and win. If Florida doesn't do that in the first 5 or 10 minutes, they're in trouble. They really are. I mean, it doesn't seem like it. I know Florida plays this relentless style. They come up big in the 3rd period, but this has been kind of a different series where you need somebody usually sets the tone. There's sort of that turn, and then the next events happen. Florida's got to be the one that makes that happen positively. Otherwise, I don't want to say it, but we might actually kind of sort of have a series if that goes south.
Yeah, I agree with what Chris said wholeheartedly. A couple things. I think that Florida's got to come out like house of fire tomorrow night. And yeah, it is cliche, but I think Edmonton's got to survive the first 5 or 10 minutes, as Chris alluded to. But here's the thing. I don't think Tkachuk is going to allow them to have a bad first 10 minutes. I think they're gonna have a solid first 10 minutes. But here's the thing, like Chris said, I do not want to go back to Edmonton for Game 6 because I don't think Florida wins a Game 6 in Edmonton. And here's the thing, we've talked about this, Jimmy, a bunch of times on podcast. Game 7, anything can happen. Somebody can get hurt, bad bounce, bad penalty. Florida needs to end this tomorrow night.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. There's a reason why this hasn't happened in almost 80 years. One team has come back from 3-0 in the Stanley Cup Final. It's 42 Maple Leafs. There's a reason it hasn't happened. You have to have everything go your way 4 times. It's very difficult. Now, look, we know what Duncan Keith did, been in there. But again, that team came up short in 2011 against Vancouver. I understand. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Because, there's a lot of talk about the Conn Smythe Trophy, right? Should it go to Connor McDavid? Should it go to Sergei Bobrovsky? Who should it go to? Look, to me, those are the 2 front runners right now. Even though Bob had a bad game in Game 4, he's still been their best player. Unless you want to give it to Barkov for what he's done defensively, but there's not there. If Edmonton pulls this off, it's McDavid's trophy to lose. Even if Edmonton doesn't pull it off, he's not winning it. Like, I don't understand where people are coming from with this. Oh, yeah, I know he broke Wayne Gretzky's record of 31 assists. Congratulations, Connor. It's unbelievable what you did. It's unbelievable. 32 assists in the playoffs. But I will, and this is a hot take, and I might take a lot of stuff for it on the internet. Outside of the Western Conference Final and the Stanley Cup Final, Connor McDavid was not noticeable in the Stanley Cup playoffs outside of a handful of games where he had 4 or 5 assists. That was it. And people can come at me. You know where I am on Twitter. You can come at me. That's fine. I don't care. But no, I'm serious because everybody's like, oh, McDavid, all these points, what he's doing. Yeah, but he got him in bunches. And there were games where he was not noticeable. Sergei Bobrovsky's been the best player for the Florida Panthers. And if he gets back to form in Game 5, it's his trophy to lose.
Well, Florida's not here without Sergei Bobrovsky. Edmonton has
100%
wins in other games without him. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that is Bobrovsky's trophy.
Look, say it best. King Bob. Wait. Got my.
All right. So we head into Game 5. What do we think the cup is out, or are we headed back to Edmonton?
Since we were so wrong on this last time, if we keep trying it, it's like, is this like the definition of insanity? You expect a different...
No, that's Toronto, buddy. That's the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Wait. That's the Maple Leafs. That's the New York Rangers. Oh, by the way, 24 to go.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there. No, this ends tomorrow night.
I'm going to disagree with you guys. I think Edmonton wins this game.
Wow.
I like it.
If he's right, well, I could see a path to it. I think a lot of people are hoping that Florida ends it. But look, if Edmonton figures out a way to get it back to 6, good for them, because we know what this team can do. We've seen it before, and we may see it again. We know what this team can do. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Game 5 live from South Florida. You know where it'll be. The pregame show. It's the best damn pregame show in the business for a reason. The Full Press Hockey Weekly Show. Game 5, the Stanley Cup Final. Guys, enjoy it. Jim Biringer, Chris Wassel, the man, Bruce Zeman, Fox Media, NHL analyst. Guys, take care. Enjoy Game 5 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Stanley Cup Final. We'll be back again, maybe for a Game 6. Who knows?
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.